Welcome to the Psychology of True Crime with me, RC. I'd like to add a disclaimer before I begin. Wendy Adelson has never been charged with any crime. This analysis does not make any claim or diagnosis about her mental health. It is a psychological interpretation based on public information and behaviors observed in media, testimony, and statements surrounding the Markel Adelson case. The story of Wendy Adelson begins long before the tragic loss of Dan Markel. It begins in a tightly woven family system, one that seemed on the surface warm and supportive, but beneath it ran the deep roots of control, expectation, and emotional dependency. Wendy grew up in a family that valued image, loyalty, and achievement. Her mother, Donna Adelson, was not just a mother, she was the matriarch, the compass of the family identity. And in Donna's world, family loyalty was not optional, it was the oxygen. This type of parenting in psychology aligns with what's known as authoritarian foreclosed parenting, where the parent defines the child's identity for them, leaving little room for any autonomy. From a young age, Wendy likely learned that approval came through compliance, that to belong meant to align with her mother's worldview. Love in such systems is conditional, and conditional love has a way of distorting a child's understanding of boundaries and independence. When Wendy met Dan, a brilliant law professor, their union seemed like a meeting of equals. Both were highly educated, intellectually driven, and determined to make their mark in the world. But underneath, there was a subtle clash of values. Dan was deeply ethical, grounded in moral reasoning and faith, while Wendy had grown up in a household where loyalty often outweighed moral boundaries. He valued autonomy. Her family valued alignment. Over time, the difference widened into an emotional canyon. Wendy's parents reportedly disapproved of Dan, his faith, his ideals, his unwillingness to relocate to South Florida to be closer to them. And in family systems like hers, this approval doesn't remain passive, it becomes a mission. Wendy's struggle between independence and loyalty likely triggered intense cognitive dissonance. On one hand, she wanted to be the accomplished, independent woman, the successful lawyer, the mother doing, doing it all on her own. On the other hand, she was tethered to her family's expectations, emotional support, and sense of belonging. To please one meant to betraying the other side. After the divorce, the psychological tug of war grew stronger. Dan's wish to stay in Tallahassee for their children was to Wendy's family an act of control, but to Dan, it was an act of consistency and fatherhood. In each court hearing, in each custody dispute, this deepened an emotional wedge between autonomy and enmeshment. Then came the tragedy that changed everything. Dan Markel lost his life in 2014, an execution style that stunned the academic and legal community. The investigation would later trace a web that connected hired hitmen to Wendy's brother and mother. Wendy herself was never charged. Still, her words and actions in the aftermath drew psychological attention. When questioned by police, Wendy made what's now known as the TV joke and said, "If I knew anything, I would have told you, but my brother made this TV joke," unquote. Hatched attempt at humor during an investigation, the kind of emotional incongruence that psychology often links to defense mechanisms such as intellectualization and emotional numbing. When emotions are too threatened or too threatening to process, the mind shifts to distance, to abstraction, even to humor to maintain control. Her interview showed a woman torn between denial and justification. She spoke of being a victim of her ex-husband's rigidity, of how he controlled everything, of how, and I quote, her family was only trying to help, unquote. From a psychological point, this mirrors a projection and, rationalization, transferring blame outward to protect oneself from internal guilt or conflict. At the same time, her dependence on her mother remained almost childlike. Donna helped her financially, advised her on life decisions, even picking her husband Dan for her. By all accounts, maintained a constant involvement in her parenting. This would feel smothering, but to someone raised in an enmeshed family system, this feels natural. Dependence is safety. Wendy's life after Dan's loss reflects a pattern of avoidance and compartmentalization. She changed careers, moved frequently, and seemed to erase much of her public identity. This kind of psychological detachment is not uncommon among individuals who live through trauma or who've lived adjacent to it. By changing surroundings, the mind attempts to change the narrative, to rewrite the script of who you are. But in truth, the original script was written long before Dan ever entered the picture. It was written in a family that blurred the line between love and control, protection and possession, and Wendy's role as the obedient daughter, the idealistic professional, the woman caught between her mother's demands and her ex husband's principles became the psychological battlefield where identity, loyalty, and morality collided. From a psychological lens, Wendy's story represents a case study in enmeshment, foreclosed identity, and moral disengagement. In such dynamics, the individual's sense of self becomes fused with the family's collective ego. Boundaries blur, and moral choices are filtered through the question, why or what will my family think, rather than what is right? And so Wendy Adelson stands not as a diagnosed figure, nor as a charged one, but as a psychological portrait of someone shaped by loyalty, control, fear, and denial. Her story serves as a reminder that family systems can nurture brilliance, or when wrapped by control, they could cultivate blindness. In the end, she remains both a central figure and a peripheral one, the daughter who claims innocence, the woman who didn't know, and the mother who now lives under the long shadow of her family who's been convicted. Whether her silence is self preservation or disassociation, only she knows. But from a psychological standpoint, silence, especially within enmeshed families, it's never neutral. It's the voice of loyalty, guilt, and survival, all speaking at the same time. Comment below. Let me know what you think of Wendy Adelson. Thank you for being here and watching. I hope to catch you on the next one.